for more on the U.S. presidential race, let's speak now to University of Massachusetts Professor Mike Hannahan. Professor, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. Politics in the United States, very fluid right now. I'm wondering whether the people there are still digesting Joe Biden dropping out of the race, or have they quickly moved on to Kamala Harris's possible candidature?
Well, there once was a Chinese curse that said, "May you live in interesting times." And we're definitely living in interesting times. I think the transition will be swift. The presidential campaign focuses one's attention, and people will just move towards Harris. It's going to be a Republican versus a Democrat like it always is. And a lot of the things that we talk about as personality really come down to party, which is already hard and defined. And everyone already has an opinion on Donald Trump.
How big a gamble is this by the Democrats?
Well, it's definitely a gamble. But again, one thing that people outside don't always understand is that we're divided between two parties, not two personalities. And whoever the Democratic nominee is, he or she will have whatever the Democrats are going to have in the election. And the entire election will be decided in 7 or 8 states by, maybe a couple 100,000 voters, because it's not a national election. Yeah.
The approval ratings, that's something that I think America takes very seriously, and the approval ratings of the president, particularly his cognitive function, it's something that appears to have weighed heavily on the party, and that is why there is lots of analysis right now about how much pressure he was under for him to drop out of this race. Let's then talk about Kamala Harris's approval ratings versus those of Donald Trump. How good a chance does she have to beat Donald Trump?
Oh, I think she has as good a chance of beating Donald Trump as any other Democrat that would run, and including President Biden. Because, like I said, Donald Trump is a well-known commodity, and no one's changing their mind on him. In terms of being an African-American woman, the people that would vote against someone just because of their race or because of their gender, for the most part, they're already Republicans. So you're not, I think, mathematically losing people. There are people like that in the United States, but they're already voting for Donald Trump. And in certain states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, she can increase voter turnout among certain groups, which can easily move that state into the Democratic category.
For the Democratic Party, how easy or difficult is it going to be for them to present Kamala Harris not as vice president, but as a presidential candidate? Do you think that's going to take some doing, or not that difficult a job?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think presenting her is going to be a difficult job, because the convention's coming up. Everybody's going to be looking at the presidential race. The media is going to be there. There's not going to be a mystery. How she performs in her speeches and in her debate, I think, will actually matter. Often debates don't matter, but I think her presentation will matter to the American people. There's going to be plenty of money on both sides, plenty of press, plenty of consultants. There's not going to be an issue with transitioning. There's going to be an issue with performance. And so we have to see how she does.
Yeah. There are suggestions that, yes, she may possibly do well, but she does have weaknesses. Talk to us about those weaknesses. Are there glaring issues that Americans immediately have a problem with when it comes to Kamala Harris?
I think Americans don't really know her that well. They just know she's not Donald Trump. So the Republicans, of course, will attack her in fairly standard American ways, and she'll have to come back and attack Donald Trump in ways that I think present themselves. She's going to run as a prosecutor. She's going to run as a person that says, I prosecuted bank fraud. Donald Trump performed it. I prosecuted sex abuse. Donald Trump did it. That's going to be her campaign thing.
That's a very interesting take, because I actually listened to that analysis today, where they were suggesting exactly what you are saying, that she's not going to run this as a presidential candidate. She's going to do it as a former prosecutor going up against a convicted felon. And
yes,
are Americans likely to gravitate towards her then?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I would certainly say that what they're hoping is that enough Americans in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona and Wisconsin do. Because again, the American presidential race has millions of voters, but it really comes down to a couple 100,000 voters in 7 or 8 places.
How worried is the Donald Trump camp after the events of the last 24, 48 hours?
I think they would have rather run against Biden. It's hard for a campaign to pivot like that. And I think Harris is going to come out with a lot of energy. I mean, it's kind of exciting, right? And politics sometimes can be boring for people, but all of a sudden, bang, it's really interesting. There's this new person who's coming on the stage, and I think that's going to take a lot of air out of Trump. He's always in the news, but I think Harris is going to take a lot of his news away from him for a while, and he's going to be angry about that. So he's going to say some outrageous things, because that's what he does. And people will know what's going on. She doesn't need a long introductory period.
What about the campaign issues that they're going to decidedly try and convince voters on? Because Donald Trump, he has always been about, let's make America great again. And that slogan, I don't think it has gone away. If anything, it's probably going to go up an inch. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, if she's going to campaign on legal issues, is that going to endear her to the electorate?
Well, I think what you do is you do a bigger picture, and you run on integrity. And you say America is already great, and we need leaders that can bring us together, not leaders that run us down. And then within that framework, she can make the legal cases. She's not like, when I say legal, I don't mean it's going to be like legal in a court case, but it's going to be accusatorial in a rhetorical sense in a political campaign. But she can just make the case that I'm going to bring America together. I'm not going to divide it. I'm going to bring it together. And the last thing we need is a liar in chief.
I'd like to talk for a moment about President Biden. There are those who are saying that what has happened here now, him dropping out of the presidential race, allows him to see out the remainder of his term. But there does appear to also be a very strong push by some, particularly the Republicans, who are saying, if he's not fit to run for president, why is he fit to see out the remainder of his term? Is that something that's going to be a big issue, or it's Republicans playing the quintessential opposition game?
Yes, the latter. It's irrelevant. Nobody cares about that. They're just doing it because they don't know yet what to say about Harris, so they're still hitting on Biden. That has no resonance with the American public. And certainly if it does have some resonance, it won't have any resonance in the election.
Will it matter as to how long it takes President Biden to emerge? Because what we know right now is that he is working from home, Delaware, and he is recovering from COVID. Is that going to matter to Americans as to how well the president really is?
Well, Trump had COVID too, and he was actually hospitalized under somewhat secret circumstances when he had COVID. And there's still been no reporting about how sick he was. So I don't think that's going to matter. I think when Biden does come back, and he will, he's going to come back strong. I feel like he probably feels a little let down by people that he trusted. He may feel a little pushed out. I mean, who wouldn't? It's a natural human feeling. But when he comes back, he's kind of free. And he's going to go after Trump hard. And I think he'll probably end up being a somewhat effective campaigner on the campaign trail. And he's gotten points from the American public for making this decision. And I think he'll be able to take advantage of it.
Yeah. You think that he may be harboring some ill feeling towards people like Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama? These are people that are understood to have been close to him, and they are, at least reportedly, we're told that they may have pressured him to make this decision.
Well, you know, it's like life, right? We all have people that do things to us and we harbor resentments, but sometimes upon reflection, we may realize they were right and it will pass. I think it is in that category.
Yeah.
I think he is a little upset, disappointed. I mean, again, who of us or any of your viewers would not feel that way? These people are human beings, and we tend to look at them as political figures, but they're people. And of course, he's going to have some resentments. But I think eventually, not that long even, he'll see he's a very decent man. And I think he's going to do everything he can to make sure that the next president of the United States is a Democrat.
Finally, Professor, I'd like to talk about foreign policy for a moment. What will foreign policy direction look like under a Trump presidency? Let's start there.
Massively different. I mean, that is an area that the Democrats and Republicans on some domestic policies aren't that far apart. They certainly aren't, say, abortion. But when it comes to foreign policy, the U.S.'s role in NATO, U.S. support for the Ukraine, U.S. support for any kind of foreign aid could just disappear under Trump, his second term, because he won't have any checks on it. So it's a radically different isolationist foreign policy.
Kamala Harris?
I think she would follow the mainstream of what I would have called 30 years ago, the mainstream of both parties, which is America engaged in the world, America engaged with its treaty partners, and America worried about dictators like Putin trying to take over countries for whatever reason, putting America in a bad position in the world.
Professor Mike Hannahan, let me thank you very much for your time.